Why reviews, and how did I find my journey into systematic reviews? Well, I gotta say, I think I had a knack for overview knowledge early on, so I was always a little bit like across things. But when I had an epiphany was when I was during my PhD making a methodological analysis. And there were basically two things. There was like the new method, and then there was the like old outdated stuff. And when I read through the literature, I had this perception, well, everybody's kind of saying the new fancy thing is cool, but what people still do, at least the majority of the people, is the old stuff. And this got me baffled and made me think. So I wanted to know whether this perception that I had of the literature is actually true. So I started reading through 5 scientific journals, 8,000 papers in total. So when other people went for lunch, I went into the library for 1 or 2 hours and I read through these articles. I didn't read them fully, I just checked, well, did they do the old stuff or did they go for the new fancy method? And that became the first review. Ultimately, 1,300 papers applied the respective methods, and we made a comparison, and my initial hunch was true. The old method was most abundantly used. People just wouldn't brag about it, but they would like hush write it somewhere a little bit in the paper. While if people used the new method, they would write it in the abstract or even into the title. We used the new method, we are cool, so this kind of stuff. And the second thing where I really had an epiphany was when I read a paper about something called non-equilibrium theory, which basically tells you something about how systems work in rangelands, how you can have droughts, how you can have catastrophes, and so on. And they wrote, there is this theory called non-equilibrium theory, which supposedly should explain that. But we have all these counter-examples somehow. We have like this case study where we know it's different. We have this country where there's different dynamics. And I was at that point playing around with climate data for other purposes. But the whole non-equilibrium theory resolves around variability. So I coincidentally had a huge data set of climate data at my hard drive. And I was like, why can't I put that to the test? So, and quite cumbersomely over several weeks, I calculated a layer of global climatic or precipitation variability, which was a meta information that I combined with the open question the people raised in their paper, where they said, well, this case basically nullifies this, and like this area basically shows that the theory is wrong, and so on. And I came to the conclusion based on my comparison with the data that I had processed, that their assumptions were wrong. They had wrong assumptions. So they said, for instance, southern Tanzania is a very stable environment, but it isn't. It shows high climatic fluctuation, so it's well in line with the non-equilibrium theory. So, and this is when we took studies and like checked their assumptions against our global database of climatic variability, and we found out that this non-equilibrium theory actually works really well, and that it's a really nice theory as it was originally proclaimed. So, and when I then became a professor, mind you, these 2 papers were still during my PhD, I came to the conclusion that, well, maybe I can't do these things alone because I have other things to do now. So, but I have the possibility to motivate other people. Maybe I can convince people. And one of the first things that happened was the Fukushima disaster. And I felt very desperate. I felt, what can I do about that? And of course, one feels really, in a sense, like helpless, So, but then I felt, can't we go to the literature and can't we check, okay, how much impact did actually the Chernobyl disaster had on the ecosystem? And we went with several co-authors through 5,000 papers. Ultimately, a little bit more than 500 were relevant. And we compiled a map, which was very important to me, to show the impact of the Chernobyl disaster, so that we know the impact a nuclear disaster can have on the environment. And the next thing then was to make this like a really conscious choice among students, to make a student-driven review. So to take a team of people and work on a topic that is emerging, that is interesting, and that was what became our Trans-Disciplinary review. It's Brand et al. 2013. And there with a small team of people, we worked together, and the students were doing the reviewing and I did the supervision and tried to compile this together with a good colleague and friend, Dave Epson. And this is how it went on. With Dave, we made a review together on ecosystem services, and there I developed a method to look at word abundances. So in other words, to let the words of the papers that we review speak for themselves. So to understand, okay, what is happening here? Like, what are people talking about? And are people using the same words where they maybe, you know, talk about similar things, which is actually quite true though. So they have a like comparable worldview or like interest. So, and this is how it went on. And very often when I had the feeling there's something interesting here, we would make a review together with students. Or if I would have a PhD student or some other people who are committed, they would make a review about their specific things. And well, then some students who were part of these endeavors made their own reviews, maybe within their PhD or maybe later. And sometimes I got involved into these papers as well. So it all kind of dribbled down into, I think, 20, 30 papers and manuscripts that happened so far. So taking a step back, looking at the whole picture is something that I'm deeply interested in. And understanding what is really happening, well, the experts know that, but they have their specific interests. So being a little bit more impartial when looking at the whole picture is something that deeply interests me. But the other thing is that actually, yes, there are emerging topics. Yes, there's very interesting theories that you can test and so on. This is all exciting. But for me, the meta-knowledge, you know, so really the knowledge about science, about how science evolves, how the publication circus happens, you know, and what are the fundamentals that make science go around. So within our reviews, we often found it's topics, it's theories, it's methods and scales. These are the things that people write about. So, and out of that, I learned then other things. I had new knowledge emerging that I could take into other things that make me think. So, and that's the fascinating thing about reviews. It can integrate knowledge, and this integration in knowledge can offer you an altogether different viewpoint. Because otherwise you're standing within some few singular studies, but really like having this coherent overview and not only looking at what we know, but also looking at the gaps, looking what we don't understand. This is what drove me into systematic reviews. And that I just wanted to quickly highlight to say that's a great benefit. It's huge work. Making a review takes about a year, if not more. And you have to maybe look at hundreds, if not thousands of papers. But I feel it's worth the effort because we gain a little bit of a bigger picture. And we have so much knowledge in science already. So I feel it's also helpful if we try to take a step back and look at the whole picture. Thank you very much.